But first of all, the original case was filed by lawyers Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey in 1970 in Texas on behalf of their client Norma McCorvey, who was known by the legal pseudonym of Jane Roe. And it was a case against the Texas Attorney General, who was called Henry Wade, so hence Roe v. Wade. And the allegation in the case was that Texas's abortion laws, which at the time were banning abortion except when necessary to save the mother's life, were unconstitutional. And the Texas court that first heard that case ruled in their favor, and that decision was immediately appealed. So in 1973, the Supreme Court ruled in a 7-2 decision that the United States Constitution did confer a right to access abortion by holding that that right was included in the fundamental right to privacy that the US Constitution confers. So that was a controversial decision at the time, and it remained controversial for a number of reasons, actually, both from pro-choice and anti-abortion positions. But that decision did hold for nearly 50 years, making it impossible for states to ban abortion outright, although many did restrict it in various ways. Until, of course, earlier this year, first we had the leaked draft decision in May, and then the final decision in June of the Supreme Court, when the current court, helped, of course, by the fact that 3 judges were recently appointed during Donald Trump's presidency, holding an anti-abortion position, overturned that landmark decision. So there's obviously a lot we could talk about the implications of that decision for women and pregnant people in the United States. And I would just like to acknowledge up front that, in some ways that's where the most immediate and direct impact of that decision is being felt, especially for those in states that have immediately moved to ban or further restrict abortion, and for those for whom it's going to be much harder to travel or pay or take one of the alternative routes available to access abortion. And so that especially, of course, will be Black and Indigenous people, people of colour, disabled people, people on very low incomes. So I do want to acknowledge that impact that's being felt right now in the US, but our kaupapa, or our topic for today, of course, is looking beyond the shores of the United States to the global implications of this decision. And so this, I think, is a good time for me to hand to you, Maliha, to just perhaps situate this discussion as well with some important international context.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction, Holly, and for the opportunity to speak a little bit about some of the other, legal terms or amendments, et cetera, that are thrown out when we're discussing this. And just to put it in context, I'm not a huge expert on this issue in the US per se. However, I think it's important to understand some of the other, laws that have been put in place since Roe v. Wade that affect the international implications and US's ability to act on it. So one thing that people often hear about, I think, in regards to this is the Helms Amendment, named after Senator Jesse Helms, which was passed in the US Congress very quickly after Roe v. Wade came into effect in 1973. So it's been around for almost 4 decades, almost as long as Roe has. And that actually states, and I'll just read it out just so I don't get it wrong, that no foreign assistance funds may be used to pay for performance of abortion as a method of family planning or to motivate or coerce any person to practice abortions. Now, of course, it states that it's only US funds that cannot be used for the practice of abortion as a family planning instrument. However, it's had in its entirety a very chilling effect on the use of US funding for anything related to abortions. So it's been widely over-exercised and over-interpreted and used throughout the history of it being in place. Though other people may also hear Leahy or the Leahy Amendment, which was put into place in 1990, that was passed by Senator Leahy in Congress, which clarified that actually Helms cannot, Helms can only be applied in a limited sense. US funding can be used for abortion that is not for family planning. So in the cases of medical emergency, incest, rape, etc. However, that's been largely ignored. So the Leahy Amendment actually clarifies that there is no chilling effect of Helms on all sorts of other services, particularly for abortion as a part of comprehensive sexual reproductive health rights, but it's been largely ignored. The other thing people might hear with regards to the US and this issue internationally is what's called the global gag rule, which is actually the official title of it is the Mexico City policy, which was passed in 1985 first by the Reagan administration, which actually is a very chilling effect. And people like Stephen must be very familiar with it because it really affects international organizations, that whenever it's in effect, these international organizations will be ineligible for any form of US funding if they participate in any provision or any part of abortion provision, right? So even if it's not the US funding itself that is being used for it, but any type of they're practicing it in any way or providing it in any way, then they're ineligible for any form of US funding. So that has a very chilling effect. Now this one keeps coming and going. So depending on the administration, if it's very consistently, if it's a Republican administration, then the global gag rule gets put in place. And then it's a very chilling effect on all sorts of provisions. And as soon as a Democrat comes in power, within a few weeks, it gets repealed, and then that sort of seesaws back and forth. But again, important for people to keep that in mind as we talk about it. And the last one, which I find also very, very disturbing, is of course the not well known, but the Geneva Consensus Declaration, which is very odd because it's got nothing to do with Geneva. It wasn't passed in Geneva. No one was sitting in Geneva. I think just like with Mex, they like to, I don't know, it's called the Geneva Consensus Declaration. It was really passed in 2020, spearheaded by the US, but has 34 countries as signatories to it, which is really about repealing the sort of a declaration of the international right to abortion, which the WHO has in place, and you will speak about it, but it's saying that there is no international right to abortion, and that all national laws related to abortion should be sort of adhered to by international agencies such as the UN. So these are just some of the things that I think we'll get thrown in shorthand as we proceed to talk about this. And I thought it might be good to clarify that. So thanks.